The Senate chamber had seen its share of heated debates, but nothing like this. On one side stood Mitch McConnell, the master tactician of Washington politics, a man who'd outmaneuvered presidents and shaped the Supreme Court for decades. On the other stood a freshman congresswoman most Americans had barely heard of, Jasmine Crockett, a former trial attorney turned lawmaker, calm, sharp, and ready for a fight she didn't start. But when she was about to finish, it began like any other joint session. Quiet murmurs filling the air until McConnell leaned into the microphone and launched what many would later call the biggest miscalculation of his career. His words were cutting, dismissive, meant to put Crockett in her place. But what followed wasn't a response, it was a legal demolition broadcast live to millions. Within minutes, a woman he'd written off as unqualified would expose decades of contradictions buried under political power plays. Viewers wouldn't just see a debate, they'd witness the moment a freshman lawmaker rewrote the rules of Washington. And the craziest part, McConnell never saw it coming. Before we dive into how Jasmine Crockett turned her public humiliation into Mitch McConnell's most embarrassing moment of the year, make sure you're subscribed, because what happened next didn't just silence the Senate floor. It changed the way America talks about power, principle, and the Constitution itself. To understand how that explosive moment unfolded, you have to know who Jasmine Crockett is and why she was never the type to back down from anyone, least of all Mitch McConnell. Before she ever set foot in Congress, Crockett had already made a name for herself inside Texas courtrooms. She wasn't a politician trying to sound like a lawyer, she was the lawyer, a Harvard-trained criminal defense attorney who'd spent years standing up for clients most people wouldn't even return a call from. Her reputation? Sharp, relentless, and unshakably calm under pressure. When she questioned someone on the stand, there were no theatrics, no wasted words, just precision. So when voters sent her to Washington, they didn't send her to blend in. They sent her to challenge the old guard that had been running things the same way for decades. And in a city built on hierarchy, that kind of confidence doesn't go unnoticed. Across the aisle stood McConnell, the definition of establishment power. Nearly 40 years in the Senate, legendary for his patience and procedural mastery. He was the man who could stall a nomination, flip a vote, or bury a bill with a single sentence. Inside the Capitol, his word carried weight that even presidents respected. To him, politics was chess, and he believed no freshman had any business even stepping on the board. The confrontation was set in motion during what should have been a routine joint session on judicial appointments. Normally, these hearings pass quietly, speeches are made, notes are taken. Everyone goes home, but not this time. McConnell saw an opportunity to remind the newcomers where they stood, and he took it. When he called out Representative Crockett, his tone dripped with condescension. He questioned her legal background, hinting that her experience was exaggerated, implying she barely understood the constitutional principles she claimed to defend. It was more than criticism. It was a challenge, a warning shot aimed not just at her, but at an entire generation of young, outspoken lawmakers daring to upset the old balance. Crockett could have ignored it. She could have let the moment pass and saved herself the risk of public embarrassment. But that's not who she is. Instead, she calmly straightened her notes, adjusted the microphone, and prepared to do what she'd always done best, turn an accusation into evidence. And that's when the chamber realized this wasn't going to be another polite exchange of talking points. It was about to become a courtroom, and Mitch McConnell had just taken the witness stand. It started with a smirk. McConnell leaned forward, his voice carrying that slow Kentucky drawl that everyone in Washington recognized instantly. He didn't raise his tone, he didn't need to. The weight of his words was enough. "We have members like Representative Crockett," he began, pausing just long enough to let the chamber fall quiet, "who claim legal expertise but demonstrate fundamental misunderstandings of constitutional principles." A ripple of murmurs rolled through the room. It wasn't what he said, it was how he said it. Dismissive. Cold. The kind of calculated jab designed to sting while still sounding professional. He went further, suggesting that her short legal career had been nothing more than a stepping stone to political immunity. That she'd abandoned the courtroom for the safety of Congress, where her lack of experience could hide behind talking points and applause lines. The implication was clear. She wasn't qualified to speak on constitutional law, and she didn't belong in his arena. For a few seconds, the entire chamber froze. Even for Washington, this was bold, direct, personal, and deliberately humiliating. McConnell wasn't just defending Senate tradition. He was sending a message to every rising progressive voice in the room. Know your place. Cameras panned to Crockett, who sat motionless, her expression unreadable. No eye rolls, no visible irritation, just that calm, lawyer's stare that says, "I've already built my case." Behind her, colleagues exchanged uneasy glances. A few whispered. Others stared down at their desks, unwilling to get caught in the crossfire. McConnell, meanwhile, folded his hands and leaned back, confident he'd just won the moment. After all, that's how these things usually went. The old guard sets the tone. The newcomer absorbs the blow and business moves on. But not this time. Because what Mitch McConnell didn't know was that the woman he'd just accused of misunderstanding the Constitution had spent the past decade defending it one courtroom at a time. And in a few short minutes, she was about to turn the entire Senate floor into her witness stand. What came next would leave even McConnell's closest allies stunned, and it would make political history for all the wrong reasons. Crockett stood slowly, papers in hand, every movement deliberate. The room went silent. No anger, no hesitation, just calm confidence. "Thank you for yielding time, Madam Speaker," she began, her tone measured. "I appreciate Senator McConnell's concerns about my legal background. Though I find it interesting he researched me so thoroughly." A faint laugh rippled through the chamber. McConnell didn't smile. Then she struck. "Since the senator questions my understanding of the Constitution, I've reviewed some of his statements." She lifted a document. In 2016, he said no Supreme Court nomination should proceed during an election year. Yet in 2020, he said the exact opposite. The silence grew heavier. Cameras zoomed in. McConnell's smirk faded. "Senator, inconsistently applied principles aren't principles at all, they're conveniences." It was surgical, no shouting, no drama. Just facts delivered like evidence. In less than 3 minutes, the balance of power in that chamber shifted. McConnell had come to expose her inexperience. Instead, she exposed his inconsistency, and the look on his face said it all. He hadn't just lost control of the moment, he'd lost the argument. The moment hung in the air like static. No one moved. No one spoke. The Senate chamber, normally a place of endless noise and debate, had gone completely silent. McConnell's fingers tightened around his glass of water. His trademark composure, the same calm that had carried him through decades of political battles, started to crack. A man who prided himself on control suddenly looked like he'd lost it. Crockett didn't rush. She let the silence work for her. Then she calmly lifted another document. "Since the senator raised questions about my experience," she said evenly, "I'll note that I've tried over 100 cases to verdict and had my constitutional arguments upheld by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals." Another pause. A few heads turned toward McConnell. By comparison, she continued, the senator practiced law for approximately 6 weeks before entering politics. A soft gasp rolled through the room. One Republican senator shifted uncomfortably. Another whispered, "Oh no," under his breath. Still, Crockett didn't gloat. Her voice stayed steady, professional, every line sharper than the last. "But perhaps we should focus on the Constitution itself," she said, setting down her notes. "Because when we twist constitutional principles to fit political needs, we don't defend democracy, we weaken it." That was it. The shift. You could feel it in the air the exact second the power dynamic flipped. McConnell, the seasoned tactician, sat motionless while a freshman representative dismantled the very foundation of his argument. Some lawmakers tried to look busy, flipping through papers to avoid meeting his eyes. Others just stared, realizing they were watching something rare in politics. A moment that couldn't be spun, denied, or walked back. And then came the silence again, heavy, electric, undeniable. That's when everyone in that room understood. This wasn't McConnell's chamber anymore. It was hers. The second Crockett finished, the chamber erupted. It wasn't chaos, it was disbelief. Senators exchanged stunned glances. Aides fumbled with their phones, and the buzz of whispered reactions filled every corner of the room. Cameras, which had been quietly rolling the entire time, suddenly became the focus. In seconds, clips of Crockett's takedown were being clipped, shared, and replayed across every major network. On social media, her name started trending before McConnell had even left his seat. Jasmine Crockett destroys Mitch McConnell in live session. The moment power shifted in Washington, freshman rep schools the Senate leader. Headlines popped up faster than anyone could read them. Hashtags flooded Twitter. Crockett versus McConnell hit over 1 million views before the hearing was even adjourned. Meanwhile, McConnell sat stone-faced, flipping through his notes as though the paper itself could save him. But the look on his staff's faces said it all. They knew this moment was already beyond repair. The internet doesn't wait and it doesn't forget. Reporters outside the chamber swarmed the hallways, shoving microphones at anyone within reach. Some senators tried to deflect. Others admitted off the record that Crockett's composure had been textbook courtroom strategy. Even political commentators, some who had criticized her in the past, called the exchange a masterclass in precision under pressure. Within hours, her following exploded. Clips hit TikTok, Instagram Reels, even late-night shows. The moment had become bigger than a debate. It was a symbol of a new generation refusing to be dismissed, no matter who stood across from them. And as the night went on, one thing became clear. McConnell hadn't just lost an argument, he'd lost control of the narrative. But Crockett? She wasn't done yet. Because what happened after the cameras stopped rolling would take the story to an entirely different level. By morning, the story had already evolved from a viral clip into a political earthquake. Every major outlet from CNN to Fox News was running the footage on repeat. Headlines blared across screens. McConnell outmaneuvered by newcomer. Crockett's calm dismantling leaves Senate stunned. Power shift on live TV. Cable panels filled with analysts trying to spin the moment. But no one could ignore what the footage showed. A young lawmaker standing firm while one of Washington's most seasoned power brokers unraveled. Within 24 hours, Crockett had become a household name. Her speech was dissected, praised, and shared by millions. Supporters hailed it as a turning point for political courage. Even some conservative commentators, usually McConnell loyalists, called her performance undeniably sharp. Behind closed doors, though, the shockwaves were much louder. Republican aides scrambled to control the narrative, urging McConnell's team to stay quiet and let it fade. But it didn't. The video only kept growing, crossing platforms, languages, and even reaching global outlets that rarely covered U.S. congressional hearings. In Democratic circles, Crockett's name was suddenly everywhere. Party strategists saw her as a new voice for discipline and composure, a fresh face unafraid to challenge hierarchy. Invitations for interviews, podcasts, and news appearances flooded in overnight. Meanwhile, whispers began circulating inside the Capitol. McConnell's influence was slipping, not because of one exchange, but because that one exchange exposed something deeper. The balance of fear had shifted. Lawmakers who once hesitated to challenge him started asking, if Crockett can stand up to him, why can't we? And as the narrative built, McConnell's silence spoke volumes. No press conferences, no rebuttals, just the sound of a political legend watching his image fracture under the weight of a single 3-minute exchange. For Jasmine Crockett, it wasn't just a win, it was validation, proof that sharpness and restraint could cut deeper than anger ever could. But as the headlines raged and interviews stacked up, she knew this moment was only the beginning. Because every viral victory in Washington comes with a price, and the next chapter of her story would test just how ready she was to pay it. What started as a single exchange on the Senate floor quickly became something much bigger. It wasn't just about Jasmine Crockett or Mitch McConnell anymore, it was about what that moment represented. For years, Washington had been defined by hierarchy. Seniority ruled and new voices were expected to wait their turn. But Crockett shattered that script. Her composure and precision showed that confidence didn't come from tenure. It came from truth. And that message hit deeper than anyone expected. Across the country, young lawmakers, especially women and people of color, began citing her as proof that standing your ground didn't require shouting, it required clarity. Her clip became mandatory viewing in political science classes, leadership seminars, even debate clubs. On social media, thousands of posts used her moment as a rallying cry for accountability. Hashtags evolved from Crockett versus McConnell to new rules of politics, a reflection of shifting public sentiment. People were tired of performative outrage and empty talking points. They wanted authenticity, and Crockett had just delivered it in real time. Even inside Congress, subtle changes started to ripple. Junior representatives began speaking more freely in sessions, no longer shrinking under senior members' shadows. Reporters noticed a new tone, one that blended respect with boldness, professionalism with conviction. And as the dust settled, one truth became undeniable. That exchange didn't just mark a viral moment, it marked a generational divide. A symbolic handoff from an old political order built on intimidation to a new one built on evidence, composure, and courage. For McConnell, the damage was reputational. For Crockett, it was transformational. And for everyone watching, it was a reminder of something Washington often forgets: power doesn't belong to whoever talks the loudest. It belongs to whoever speaks the truth with the most precision. In Washington, moments fade fast. Scandals, speeches, headlines, they all blur together by the next news cycle. But this one didn't. Jasmine Crockett's quiet, calculated takedown of Mitch McConnell became more than a viral clip. It became a case study in how power is shifting in American politics. Her composure reminded people that intelligence can be louder than arrogance, and that facts, when delivered with confidence, can shake the foundation of an institution built on tradition. For McConnell, the incident became a turning point in his career. Once seen as untouchable, he now carried the image of a man who underestimated his opponent and paid for it in real time. Behind the scenes, allies urged him to rebuild his image. But for many viewers, the moment had already crystallized. The old playbook no longer worked. For Crockett, it marked the beginning of a new chapter. She wasn't just another member of Congress, she was the face of a political generation, unafraid to speak truth to power. Her name became synonymous with poise under pressure, and her story inspired a wave of young people to see politics not as a distant game, but as a field where precision and authenticity could actually win. And that's the lasting power of the story. Not that one person humiliated another, but that one voice reminded millions that you don't need seniority to have authority. You don't need decades in office to earn respect. All you need is the courage to stand, stay calm, and speak the truth no matter who's sitting across from you. Because sometimes all it takes to rewrite history is one moment, one microphone, and the courage to use it.